Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. If it's July, it's fresh peaches and plums, and there are a lot of tasty, nutritious varieties out there that you won't find in any supermarket. Phil Purcell from Dave Wilson Nursery has the list today of must-have backyard peach and plum tree varieties. We've talked a lot on this show about how to deal with clay soil in the garden, but what about overly sandy soil? Sandy soil can drain too quickly and lacks a lot of nutrients. Master Gardener Gail Pothauer has tips for enriching the productivity of your sandy soil. Well, it's time to put out another brush fire on the internet. Making the rounds are suggestions about the benefits of adding sticks to raised beds. Well, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor, Debbie Flower, has a lot of good reasons why you don't want to have that layer of sticks at the bottom of your raised bed. And by the way, whatever happened to the Tuesday edition of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast? It's still around, and we'll tell you where you can find it now. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban Purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Let's go. It's always great to talk with Phil Purcell from Dave Wilson Nursery. Dave Wilson Nursery is a wholesale grower of fruit and nut trees, and they sell those trees to a retail nursery in your area, your independent retail nurseries. And two of their best-selling varieties of fruit trees, as you might imagine, peaches and plums. And Phil, I guess one reason they are so popular is, well, they're easy to grow and they're tasty.
They are. I mean, summertime favorites, right? When you think of fresh fruit this time of year, you think peaches and plums. That is summertime fruit eating.
What are the popular peach varieties? And I imagine every region of the country has their own favorites.
Yeah, they do. And then kind of different cultures have their, favorites too. There's the old time O. Henrys, Albertas, and the yellow peaches, Red Baron for Southern California, Contender for out in the East Coast is a big time favorite. Then there's white varieties, Babcock, everyone's familiar with that one. Donut peach, which is a white donut peach you find in all the specialty stores. And that one, the Asian culture loves the donut peach. And it's because it's very high in sugars. Problem with that is a lot of times you don't see it in your regular grocery store because it's so high in sugars, it bruises. So the best way of getting a donut peach is just go ahead and growing it yourself.
And one reason it's called a donut peach is it's kind of flat. It's not necessarily globular like you might imagine a peach is. It's kind of flat like a donut.
It is. It's known as a saucer peach or pinto peach. It's like a flat donut.
And as you said, very, very sweet. Very
sweet. So peaches come in two categories, or we categorize them ourselves as either acidic or non-acidic. So acidic is, do you remember that old time peach, the summertime peach, where you bite into it and has that sweet, little slightly tart, juicy flavor? That's an acidic peach. And generally speaking, those are all going to be all your yellow peaches. Floyd Zager really did a lot of hybridizing. And like the Europeans and the Asians, they don't tend to like the acidic peaches as much as the white peaches, which is really more of a sweet, sugary type of peach. So those are the two peaches that are your choices when you go into a retail garden center to pick. And you start, do you want a yellow peach or do you want a white peach?
Floyd Zager, of course, a fruit tree hybridizer of note, probably the most famous hybridizer in America.
Absolutely.
Now, two terms that people may come across when they're looking at peaches are freestone and cling peach. What is the difference?
So freestone is if you take a peach and you cut it in half and twist it, if the flesh pops away from the pit itself, that's a freestone. If you try to twist it and it doesn't, well, that's a cling peach, and the flesh will actually cling on to the stone itself. Just two different, eating wise, generally people kind of prefer the freestone because you can, easily separate it from the pit and then cut it into slices. Cling peaches make very good eating peaches. They're also tend to be the ones that the canners use, are the cling peaches.
Now, one limiting factor when it comes to peaches, and if you're looking for a tasty peach, if you go to the Dave Wilson Nursery website, davewilson.com, you can find their list of the best tasting varieties over their taste test results that they conducted over 20 years. And among the top scorers for peaches include the Harkin and the O. Henry, but they have a requirement of a lot of chill hours. A chill hour is any hour below 45 degrees, ideally between 32 and 45 degrees during the period of November through February. Most areas of the country, if they have cold winters, they get over 800 chill hours, which is perfect for the O. Henry and the Harkin. But for areas like Southern California or the Southern United States that may have fewer chill hours, what are the best tasting varieties for them?
Probably one of my favorites is Red Baron. Red Baron is an acidic, high flavor peach, but it's also an edible ornamental. When I say edible ornamental, when the Red Baron blooms, the flowers are of almost a red color as opposed to the typical pink. So it's a really, really dark, pinky red bloom. So it's a beautiful tree, and the fruit it produces is great. That's for the yellow peach. On the white peach, one of the favorites, again, is the donut. The donut peach is very popular. Interesting thing about the donut peach is that it is very low chill adaptable. However, it is a very cold hardy peach. So you can plant a donut peach in San Diego and it'll perform well. And you can plant a donut peach over on the East Coast, on the Eastern Seaboard, and it'll perform well.
All right. Yeah. The donut white peach has a chill requirement of 200 to 300 hours, which is not much at all. And we should point out that the reason those chill hours are necessary, it helps the tree set its buds for the following season.
Yes. It's becoming even more out here in California. It's become more evident that we're acquiring less chill hours every year. So, all the breeders, they're very, cognizant of this, and they're breeding for the fact that we're not having as much chill hours and that they have to focus in on lower chill fruit.
One of my favorite peaches is actually a miniature peach. It only gets maybe 5 or 6 feet tall. But what I really like about it, besides the tasty fruit, is the beautiful flower show it puts on in the spring. And that's the Garden Gold miniature peach. It's a yellow freestone peach. And in fact, the picture accompanying our little chat here at the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast is that Garden Gold peach in full bloom. And it's just gorgeous pinkish reddish blooms.
It is. It's show-stopping. In our mother block at the nursery, when all of our miniature peaches are in bloom, it's incredible. Most of them have double flowers and anywhere from mid pinks to, almost a reddish color. And these miniature peaches, interesting enough, are true dwarfs. So we actually have to graft these miniature peaches on a standard rootstock so that at full maturity, it'll get up to 6 feet tall. They've been just developed over the years and kind of hybridized to have full flavor. But it's great for someone who has just, a small backyard or a larger container that they want to keep it in for a few years to have a peach tree. This is something that at Dave Wilson Nursery, we're really starting to focus in and introduce new varieties. So we understand that yards are getting smaller, but people still want full-size fruit and edible ornamental.
Now, we should point out there's a whole different category of peaches called flowering peaches that have been developed basically for those flowers, but not much in the way of fruit development, correct?
Correct. So the flowering peaches are very popular with the flower growers, the florists, that fresh cut market to coincide with, different holidays early in the season, like Chinese New Year's. So there's early flowering red and there's peppermint, and those are grown for the flowers itself, but the fruit is very unremarkable in tasting.
What are the problems people may encounter over the years with peach trees? I know here in California, peach leaf curl is a big problem, but it's more of a nuisance than a problem.
Correct. Yeah. Peach leaf curl is something that can be prevented by just spraying dormant sprays in the wintertime. That seems to be the number one, quote unquote, nuisance of a peach tree. And that's kind of throughout the United States is leaf curl. Other than that, understanding that peach trees kind of have a normal cycle in life. Most of the growers out here will replace peach trees after about 20 years, kind of like almond. If you have a really old peach tree, let's say 30 years, and you start seeing it declining, and maybe it starts becoming a little bit more susceptible to insects, it's just because that tree is an old tree. Unlike apple trees, which are long-lived, peach trees, 20, 25 years is its maximum.
All right. Yeah. Keep that in mind. If you're planting peach trees, if you start seeing decline after a couple of decades, life is too short to put up with a problem plant. Time to plant something else.
It really is.
So you mentioned insects. What are the major insect pests of peach trees?
Peach trees can get what's known as a peach tree borer, and it's just the larva of a beetle. And it tends to attack trees that are kind of stressed. So older trees or trees that have been neglected. And what it will do is the borer itself will kind of eat around the inside of the bark layer, and then it'll stop water flowing up to the leaves. And then you tend to have insect or problems with it going forward. The key to anything like that is if you keep the vigor of your fruit trees up, you're less likely to encounter, any type of insect problems. Well, insects really go after the weakest of the flock out there.
Let's make some vigorous peach trees then. What are some tips for watering and fertilization and care of peach trees?
Peaches, we like people to, think about watering and maybe plant it. You want to make sure that it gets to a good start. But as a tree increases in size, you'll need to increase the water, but the frequency isn't as necessary as the amount of water that it's put on. Also, think of watering any type of fruit trees as almost like a bell-shaped curve. In early March, that tree will require less water than it will require in July right now, in the heat of the summer. So if you have it on a regular timer, and you have it set at a March setting, you're going to want to make sure that in July you increase the amount of water that you're putting down. And then when you get into September, you want to decrease it. Think of it as, like I say, a bell-shaped curve. It's really hard to say how much water to put on each tree because everyone's soil is a little bit different. But if the tree's not getting enough water, it's going to let you know it's going to go ahead and start wilting. So that's when you need to apply more. And you're going to generally find that in July and August.
For areas of the country that get summer rain, do peach trees still need regular irrigation?
It kind of depends. If you get regular summer rains, that's probably going to be sufficient enough. I'm thinking more of here on the West Coast, which, we have that Mediterranean climate where we get no summer rain. And irrigation is definitely something that needs to be done. But on the East Coast, when you get heavy rains, that's generally going to be sufficient enough.
What about fertilizer for peach trees? Is it necessary?
We really like, when we go back and talk about the vigor of a tree, generally speaking it gets a lot of vigor from fertilizers. And we at Dave Wilson Nursery, we like to recommend organic fertilizers. And a kind of a good, if you want to just very easy rule of thumb, is you fertilize right after the fruit sets around pea size with an organic fruit tree fertilizer. And then once again, midsummer with that, organic fruit tree fertilizer. And then towards the end of summer, one more application. And that kind of that last application gets the peach tree ready for the winter. And the reason we like organic fertilizers is that they tend to be very slow releasing. So if you over applicate, the odds of you burning the tree or stressing it is fairly low. That's why we recommend organics over, let's say, something like a triple 15. Triple 15 or triple 16 would be fine, but you got to be really careful when you apply that in the heat of the summer. Whereas with organic fertilizers, like I say, since they break down slowly, it just makes it easy for the homeowner not to be overly concerned.
As we've mentioned on this program before, generally speaking, organic fertilizers have single-digit numbers on the label. Those 3 numbers you see on any fertilizer represent the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in that product. And if you choose a fertilizer with single digits, like a 888 or a 522 or something like that, chances are it's probably an organic fertilizer.
It is. It is.
Well, before we run out of time here, let's talk plums. I mean, plums are just so tasty, and it is, I believe the word in your industry is precocious.
Yes.
In that they tend to produce way too much fruit.
They really are. We call them, maximizing your yield for a fruit tree. That describes a plum, right? They said heavy fruit. It's fantastic fruit. And it's one of those fail-safe trees where people say, well, sometimes I have a hard time, with this fruit tree or that fruit tree. They generally never say that with a plum tree because plum trees just produce fruit. And this is throughout the country. It's another one of those where they thrive, and there's varieties that do great in low chill areas. There's European plums for really cold areas. There's Asian plums that do really good in cold areas. I mean, they're super adaptable. And it's one of those where if you plant a plum tree, you're going to get fruit off of it a lot.
Are the Japanese plums sweeter than the European plums?
They are. They're sweeter, and they're definitely juicier than European plums. And that's why they're the favorite ones that you see in grocery stores. European plums are known as prunes, whereas Japanese plums are known as plums.
Now, in the taste test that I have participated in at Dave Wilson Nursery over the years, and when it comes to tasting plums, one of my favorites has been the Weeping Santa Rosa plum, which is just so sweet.
Santa Rosa was developed by Luther Burbank, and that's still the number one home and garden plum out there. It's, once again, like I say, it's very adaptable. Does well in Southern California, the southern states, and it also does very well in the Midwest and the Eastern Seaboard. It's the classic plum that everyone is kind of thinking of when they think of plums. The Weeping Santa Rosa, it was a sport that was found, and it actually naturally grows like a weeping flowering cherry. So it never gets super tall like some plum trees can because it just has this weeping canopy. But the fruit is just another variation of the traditional Santa Rosa plum.
Now, when people go to their local nursery and they see some Dave Wilson plum trees, they may see the Emerald Butte plum, which, again, a development of Floyd Zager. And that's a taste test winner, too.
It is. And, in fact, it's my favorite plum. I have one. I was checking it in the yard yesterday. It's a very late plum. For us, it produces in the months of September and October. And so when I say the months of September and October, it actually hangs on the tree for about 8 weeks. You can eat it hard ripe, and it tends to be green late August, early September. And if you let it hang on the tree, it'll turn to a yellow, and it'll become very soft and very juicy. And that's what you see in October. The difference between something like that and a Santa Rosa plum produces its fruit, and it tends to drop all at one time, in a 2-week period, where there are certain varieties of plums like Emerald Butte, or another one would be Burgundy plum, and I have one of those in my orchard. That's another one that hangs on the tree for an extended period. So you don't have to worry about eating all those plums all at once. You have an extended period of eating them.
And for those listening in Southern California or maybe down in Florida, are there low-chill, tasty plum varieties?
They are. And my favorite low-chill plum is definitely the Burgundy plum. And the reason I like that is because it also acts as a pollinizer. Most plums are self-fertile. You only need one. Burgundy's is the case. Same with Santa Rosa. But let's say if you want to venture out and maybe plant a pluot or pluary that needs a pollinizer, if you have a Burgundy in your yard, that's going to take care of all its pollinizing needs, yet still give you all the fruit you want. Tom and I, we really recommend the Burgundy for Southern California, low chill areas, but it's also still hard to beat that Santa Rosa plum. Tom is our Southern California salesman, and he really is, when it comes to fruit trees, he's probably one of the most knowledgeable in the country on all different fruits, whether it's citrus or stone fruit.
That would be Tom Spellman. Now, you used a couple of terms that people may not be familiar with, and they should be familiar with because they'll fall in love with them. You mentioned pluot and pluary. So a pluot would be a plum apricot cross. A pluary, people can probably guess, is a plum cherry cross.
Yeah, and those are just interspecific, just hybrid fruit that are very common out here in California. You go in a grocery store and they'll list them as, as pluots. Whereas maybe back east, those pluots are still being marketed as plums. And
ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, do not judge the quality of a pluot by what you buy at a grocery store.
Absolutely not.
Judge the pluot by somebody's backyard tree or maybe something you might find at a farmer's market, because the supermarket pluots, I think, were just bred for shipping and stability and not necessarily for taste.
Correct. Absolutely.
We've learned a lot about peaches and plums today from Phil Purcell. If you want to learn more about fruit trees, all sorts of fruit and nut trees, visit the Dave Wilson website, davewilson.com, where not only are you going to find taste test results and information about just about every fruit tree going, you're going to find videos that can help you raise that fruit tree or nut tree correctly and prune them as well. It's their Fruit Tube video series. You can find it at davewilson.com. Phil Purcell, thanks for a few minutes of your time.
Yep. Thanks for having me on.
Congratulations to Smart Pots. They recently won the National Retailer's Choice Award from the North American Hardware and Paint Association. It's in recognition of Smart Pots' innovation and quality in the gardening world. And there's good news for wholesale and commercial growers who use Smart Pots. A recently published study by the University of Florida said that the initial production of plants in Smart Pot fabric containers resulted in marketable plants 3 months earlier, saving approximately $1 per plant in production costs, thereby opening up production space for another crop. Smart Pots, they're proudly made 100% right here in the USA, and they're BPA-free and lead-free, making them safe for growing vegetables and other edibles. They're available in sizes from 1 gallon to 1,000 gallons. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers as well as select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. And you can buy Smart Pots online. Just visit smartpots.com/Fred. And don't forget that /Fred part. On that page are details about how you can get 10% off your Smart Pot order by using the coupon code FRED, F-R-E-D. Just apply it at checkout from the Smart Pot store. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful fabric containers. And don't forget that special Farmer Fred 10% discount. It's Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. We answer your garden questions here on the Garden Basics podcast. Craig from northern Wisconsin, and he's so happy, he says, we've transitioned from USDA Zone 3 to 4. Congratulations, Craig. And he says, I found your podcast recently. I really enjoy it. I grew up with a vegetable garden and have had container plants for several years, but I recently bought a home and finally have space for an in-ground garden. I just finished listening to your episode on gardening with clay soil and found it very interesting, but I'd love to hear an episode on sandy soil. I have access to a healthy supply of yak manure. That's right, yak manure. and top-dressed with compost this spring and plan on adding more in the fall. Besides adding manure and compost, what else can I do to improve my sandy soil? I'm also planning on sowing cereal rye and maybe vetch this fall as a cover crop. I've had a soil test. The texture type turns out as sandy loam, but I'm deficient in N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. My acidity was better than I expected. The pH is 6. And he points out again, he's in northern Wisconsin. Craig, thank you for writing in, and thank you for alerting us to yak manure as a possibility. There's a lot of yak manure apparently up in northern Wisconsin. If you Google it, there's a lot of research being done on it up that way. We're with Gail Pothauer, Master Gardener at an open garden day here at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. I think Craig's got this under control.
Sounds pretty good. I mean, I'm impressed that he's had a soil test and all these things he's planning to do, cover crops and whatnot. But as someone who is married to a person from Wisconsin, my husband's from Wisconsin, I've heard all about Wisconsin glaciation, the glaciers when they came through. And so I've heard that story numerous times. So there is a lot of sandy soil in Wisconsin. So what happens is those glaciers from gazillion years ago, they would pick up all kinds of mineral debris and all that. And as they're melting, they deposit sand and gravel. And so a lot of that, especially up in northern Wisconsin, has a lot of sandy soil. I'm impressed that he knows he has sandy loam, which is good. Yeah. But sandy soils tend to not have much organic matter. Adding compost is great as long as it's a mature compost. He talks about the yak manure, which I'm unfamiliar with. I personally use llama manure, llama poop, but yak manure, I would think that it's similar to cattle, so you'd want to be sure that it's composted.
Yeah, well composted.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it in the soil, uncomposted, unless you did it, say, in the fall and then let it compost over the winter, age over the winter, and then plant in the spring. But yeah, doing cover crops is great, especially if he's deficient in nitrogen. Doing the legumes would be good. Vetch is a legume. Rye would provide a lot of organic material, and you just need to continually add compost because sandy soil is coarse. It doesn't hold nutrients. It doesn't hold water very well.
Very narrow drain pattern, too.
Right. Yeah, as opposed to clay where, it'll spread out. But with sandy soil, it's going to just drain right out. So use mulch. I would highly recommend using a thick layer of mulch. I'm assuming this is in a vegetable garden. So straw is great. Trying to think what other mulch they might use.
Leaves from the trees.
Yeah, leaves are good if you shred them up. But mulch would be great. And then as that decomposes, that adds organic matter to the soil. So with sandy soil, just continually replenish with compost.
And that's going to take care of his NP and K shortage as well.
Right. And he might also want to add some nitrogen fertilizer. The legumes won't provide enough, probably, and nitrogen tends to dissipate faster, and it will leach out through the sandy soil.
Well, there's always yak manure.
Yak manure, yeah. I'm going to have to look that up. I'm not familiar with yak.
The one concern that I was reading about in this research of using yak manure, there were all these cautionary tales of being sure that it is well composted in a hot compost pile because of the antibiotics they use.
Yeah, it could be. I didn't realize yak was a big thing in Wisconsin. So I mean, I don't know. Do they have yaks for milk or meat? I mean, I don't know what you do with a yak.
Racing? Rodeos?
Could be. I don't know. But I would also suggest that maybe he contact the University of Wisconsin in Madison. They have a lot of publications on improving your soil and all types of things. And so, I would suggest that he contact them or at least get on their website.
Yeah, there's a lot of good websites that can tell you how to improve sandy soils. North Carolina State University has a very good one, too, called Improving Sandy Soils. And basically what you're doing, Craig, just keep at it. Yeah,
and it's going to be a continual process because you just need to continue to add compost or other organic material year after year.
Good job, Craig. Gail, thank you.
Good job. Yeah, you're welcome, Fred.
So whatever happened to the Tuesday edition of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast? Well, it ran away from home and joined the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter on Substack. There, it really is a deeper dive into what you may have heard on the podcast, with more information, links, pictures, opinion, and of course, stuff that just popped into my head. So how do you get this podcast? When you sign up at substack.com/gardenbasics, and Garden Basics is one word, you'll get the podcast and newsletter sent directly to your email box every Tuesday. And it's free to subscribe, for now, because Daddy needs a new bike. And in that eventuality, we'll start up a special premium edition. But don't worry, I work cheap because I love gardening and bicycles. It's the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter on Substack, and it's free. There's a link in today's show notes, or just go to substack.com and do a free search for Beyond the Garden Basics, or do a search for Farmer Fred. Or you can go directly to the page, substack.com/gardenbasics. Think of it as your garden resource that goes beyond the basics. The Beyond the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter. Welcome back to Garden Basics with Farmer Fred. Debbie Flower, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor, is here. And Debbie, we get a lot of comments from people who saw things on the internet about gardening, and it must be true because it got so many views or so many hits or so many likes. Well, maybe not. If it isn't backed by peer-reviewed scientific information, we like to shy away from it and just give you good, solid advice. But another tip that is flying around the internet is building raised beds and what you put at the bottom of raised beds. And in this one case, this person who was building raised beds said for drainage, he was going to line the bottom of his raised beds with sticks to improve that drainage. This sounds vaguely familiar, like what we've been talking about with pots and putting things at the bottom of pots, like gravel or rocks. Or
you mean not putting things at the bottom of pots?
Well, yes, but they go ahead and do it anyway because they read it on the internet and so many people saw it, so it must be true.
Right.
Well, no.
Right.
And you know that what's nice about what we're about to talk about is there is proof on the internet in videos where you can see how slow water moves when it has to change layers.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what happens when you put large things in the bottom of a container and then put the media on top of it, you just shorten the root zone. Now the plant can only grow in the media that's above those stones or sticks.
We see this a lot, too, in a lot of tips that are supplied on the internet about how you can save money on potting soil by filling the bottom of a container of any sort with something else. And look at all the money you'll save. Well, look at the lack of plants you're going to end up with eventually because of a smaller area that can retain water or has too much water.
Right. Yes. So the water goes down through the media that the plants are growing in, gets to that change in layer from the container media to the rocks or the stones or whatever it is and stops. And so the water collects there, the soil becomes saturated, and then it can actually produce gases that are bad for plants.
Gases?
Yes.
Ooh, that's new.
Anaerobic decomposition occurs. Anaerobic, an means without. Aerobe is air. So it's decomposition of the organic matter in the container media that decomposes without air. And that produces gases that are bad for plants. It can smell like low tide or kind of a little acidic, bad fish if you dig down there.
So what do roots do when they find that?
They die.
Oh, the roots die. They don't turn and go the other way.
No, they just die.
Wow, how sad. But you might be saying, well, Fred, we're not talking about a container plant. We're talking about a raised bed. Well, what is a raised bed? It's just a big container.
It is a big container, right. You've lifted the media up off the field soil, and it depends what you put in it, whether you've used field soil or container media or a mixture, but it's still a container. If you don't put anything in the bottom of that raised bed, the water can drain all the way down, and it'll either go into the field soil or it'll just exit out the side of the raised bed. And you won't accumulate so much that you get that anaerobic decomposition.
Theoretically, you want it to penetrate even deeper into the soil. And I guess the way around that is as you're building that raised bed, it would be to incorporate the new soil with the existing soil?
Yes. So put a little layer of the new soil. You're only going to dig about 4 inches total to do the incorporation. So 2 inches of the new soil and dig that into the soil below it. And you'll get a 4-inch transition zone. That's a mixture of whatever you're using above in the raised bed to whatever is in your soil below.
So that'll at least take it deeper into the existing soil instead of it running outside and level and just basically flooding the outer area of your raised beds.
Which I've seen happen. I've seen that in raised beds.
I've seen it in my backyard. Yes. Again, it's not going to improve drainage, which may seem counterintuitive because, you can't really pack sticks too tightly together if there's really sticks. Sawdust you could pack together too tightly, but with sticks you'd think, there's plenty of air there for the water to get through.
Water doesn't travel through air in soil. Water travels along the edges of whatever's there. We see water coming out of faucets traveling through air. We see rainwater travels through air. It doesn't work that way underground. Water stays attached to things. It runs along the soil particles, along the organic matter particles, if it gets to the sticks, travels along the sticks, but there's so much less surface area on those sticks than on the media above. It takes forever for the water to drain out there. So you've actually created a perched water table where those roots are going to rot.
So in this case, it's Interstate 80 going from 6 lanes down to 3 lanes.
Right.
And
so
the traffic backs up.
Right. And the traffic is the water and the sticks are the 3 lanes and the media is probably more like 30 lanes.
Yeah. All right. But anywhere where you have a normal bottleneck in your travels.
Right.
And there's going to be a traffic jam. That's what happens when water is trying to go from one media to another.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It just slows down and ends up creating an anaerobic environment.
Yes.
Because water does take away the air.
Yes. So the water has come down. It's traveled along the particles. And then some water comes down and all the particles are covered already. Well, then the water will stick to the water. Water has what's called adhesion. Water sticks to water. And it has cohesion, meaning water sticks to other things. The molecule of water is 2 hydrogens. If you take your pointer finger and your middle finger and spread them out as far as you can.
As far as I can go.
At the tips of your fingers would be a hydrogen, each one.
Okay.
And between them on your palm of your hand would be the oxygen. Oxygen is negatively charged and hydrogen is positively charged. So then if my water molecule came with another one, they fit together. And that's how they adhere to each other.
Where is the church? Here is the church. Show me the steeple. Here is the steeple. Okay. Come for the gardening, stay for the chemistry. That's how H2O2 sticks to each other. H2O. H2O, not H2O2.
No,
H2O2,
that's hydrogen peroxide.
Which is what I put on open wounds after scraping against a lemon tree.
Yes.
All right. I'm sorry. I was leaning on the keyboard. So I guess basically what we're saying is whatever you're filling, be it a raised bed or a small container, make sure it's all the same soil type.
All the way to the bottom.
All right. There you go. So leave the sticks to play pickup sticks with.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Debbie.
You're welcome, Fred.
Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Friday. It's brought to you by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics, it's available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, as well as an accurate transcript, visit our website, gardenbasics.net. And there you can find out about our newsletter, Beyond the Garden Basics. And thank you so much for listening and your support.